In this video, I'm now going to explain to you all the ideas that you need to know around the shifts of a production possibility curve. And before I go into the details, let me just show you how you can quickly sketch a PPC and what basically it means in summary. Now, production possibility curve, remember we said it's a theoretical way of graphically showing the maximum amount of any two goods that a country can make. So we can just call them good X and good Y. And an easy way of sketching this PPC is to first of all think about an extreme possibility where the country puts all of its resources to make just good X. And that would simply tell us that look, the country would end up producing a certain amount or maximum amount of good X and no good Y. That is, you will end up at a point on a PPC. So that gives you one production possibility. And then think of the other extreme possibility where the country puts all the resources in good Y. Then you will definitely know that you are not going to end up making any good X, whereas you will produce some maximum amount of good Y. You will end up at some point on the Y axis. And once you have these two extreme possibilities, you can just connect them together and you will get your production possibilities curve. And remember, we have learned in detail that this PPC shows us the productive capacity of the country. It shows us the productive limit of this country. A country can produce less than these combinations. It can produce, remember, inside a PPC, but it cannot go beyond a PPC. This is the end of its productive limit, its productive capacity. Now, what determines what is the productive capacity of a country? What determines whether your PPC will sit here or maybe here or maybe, somewhere even further outside? Well, the idea, again, stick to your basics. This whole limitation as to the maximum a country can produce is linked with the fact that your country will have limited resources. And that is why you cannot produce more than a certain maximum combination of these two goods. And from here, start thinking about whether this PPC can shift and whether this productive capacity can change. And the answer should come out simply and very automatically that yes, look, any country's productive capacity can increase. Maybe it discovers more resources. Maybe it improves the quality of its resources. Maybe it discovers new technology because of which it can get much more out of the existing resources it has. And in either of these cases, if you have more quantity of your limited resources or increase in quantity or increase in quality or better technology, then you will have an increased productive capacity and that will reflect in a shift of PPC. And how will that PPC shift? Now, let me just, again go through an imaginary example over here. And let's assume this is the PPC of Pakistan. And I'm telling you that this good X happens to be, again, let's assume anything simple, cars. Now, if I tell you next morning that, look, Pakistan as a country has discovered a lot of minerals and gold and oil for some reason overnight. And then I ask you, do you think Pakistan will now be able to make more cars? Then of course it should be able to make more cars. If it has suddenly found so many new resources, then its productive capacity, if it puts all of these new resources into production of cars, then we don't know exactly how many more cars it will be able to make, but yes, it will be able to make more cars. That is not rocket science. Similarly, if I ask you that, look, with all of these resources, what if Pakistan puts all of them in good Y? Then again, the answer simply should be that, look, whatever maximum amount of good Y you were able to produce previously, now you should be able to produce at least some more than that. You have so many new resources that you have found. And then join these two new points and you get a shift outwards of the production possibility curves. Whenever the quantity of your limited resources increases or maybe the quality. Now let me explain the quality bit. And again, let me just go through an imaginary example here. And let's assume that all of the labor that Pakistan owns has been exchanged with all of the labor that USA owns. And similarly, all of the machinery or all of the capital that Pakistan owns, that has been exchanged with the machinery or capital of the US overnight. Again, an imaginary scenario. Now, of course, people in the US, they are more educated, they are more highly skilled, and they are more highly, or I should say, they are more advanced because of education, basically. Similarly, the US have more advanced machinery, more advanced tools and equipments. Now, if they sort of exchange them and give these to Pakistan and take the outdated Pakistani labor and machinery and capital and so on and so forth, that is where we are saying that certainly Pakistan will have a much better quality of labor and machines. Maybe the same number, but much better quality. And again, it should be able to make more of good X than before and more of good Y than before. So improved quality again allows you to produce more of both the goods, and your PPC shifts outwards. And then the third thing that can cause the shift of PPC is technology. Now, technology is a very broad term. By technology, we don't mean computers and internets and IT. By technology, we mean some very broad level thing that relates to how the country goes about producing things. What are the different methods of production that this country can use? And by changing technology, we mean the whole process of production has been made so advanced or changed to such an extent that with the same amount of resources, you are somehow able to combine them in a different way or run the production processes in such a highly advanced different way that you start making more and more goods through those processes. So here you can think simply of mass production. That Mr. Ford in the USA, for the first time when he introduced mass production, that was just a different way of combining all the resources and making cars. But he ended up being able to make a lot more cars with just a little bit of resources. And this is where we say that, look, he came up with a new production technology, which eventually led him to allowed him to make a lot of cars. So a change or increase in technology, remember, will again shift your PPC outwards. And therefore this topic here is pretty simple. There is no rocket science that you need to understand. And if you want to go into the details, then just remember in an earlier lecture in section 1, I explained to you how a country can try and increase the quantity and quality of land, labor, capital and enterprise that it possesses. Labor, we said, it can increase because of immigration, it can increase because of increased female labor force participation. Land, we said, it can increase because of technology and so on and so forth. Similarly, capital, we said you can invest and make more capital. And entrepreneurs, the government can invest more in education, give more MBA degrees to people and offer more startup loans to entrepreneurs and so on and so forth. So all of these policies over here, which will eventually either improve the quality or quantity of your resources, will cause an outward shift of your PPC. And this outward shift, remember, is also known sometimes as potential economic growth, because your country's potential to produce goods has increased. And the reason we are calling it potential economic growth, this shift outwards of the PPC, is that, look, what your country actually produces, it depends on which point within this graphical space, which combination your country is deciding to make. Now, if tomorrow morning you wake up and you are told that Pakistan has discovered a lot of natural resources and therefore its potential output has increased, that doesn't mean it has already started making more goods and services. People are still going to next day make all the goods that they were making yesterday. So actually you are still sitting at this point, but your potential has increased. So potential economic growth means when your PPC shifts outward, it tells you that, look, you can do better. Whether you will actually do better, that depends on whether you stick to this point or you start moving closer towards your new PPC. If you do that, this is actual economic growth, and this shift out of the PPC is potential economic growth. And lastly, as we are on this, also remember that sometimes the PPC can also shift inwards. So a shift like this would be an inward shift when it falls inside. That is where you are saying that, look, as compared to the initial maximum amount of good X, you are now being able to produce less. And similarly, as compared to the initial maximum amount of good Y, you are now being able to produce less. Now, how would that be possible? When your quantity or quality of resources diminishes. Think about earthquake, think about natural disasters, think about wars, where some of your industry, some of your infrastructure, some of your people are destroyed. A decrease in the quantity or quality of resources, and that would mean your productive capacity diminishes. Think of the recent bomb blast on the Lebanese port, where most of the city of Beirut was destroyed. That is where we say that next year you won't be able to produce as much you were producing as before. So the productive capacity of that city has suddenly decreased because the quantity of resources have just disappeared in that terrible bomb blast.